Alright, in this video, I'm going to teach you guys how you can effectively set a limit order on Uniswap using this advanced tactic and actually get paid fees in the process of doing so instead of paying the fees yourself. So it's really interesting, but it's also a very advanced strategy. So if you're new to crypto, you're going to want to learn about everything else first. This is really just an advanced topic, and it's more for larger positions in general and more serious positions. But what you can do is, guys, you can actually utilize the Uniswap protocol, and by utilizing range-bound liquidity, you can effectively set such a tight range that your liquidity position behaves as if it was a limit order. So even though there's no limit order button here on the Uniswap interface, look right here, guys. This is the Uniswap interface. Everybody's familiar with this. If you've been buying HEX for any amount of time at all, you've probably come to this website in order to buy or sell HEX. So if you want to buy HEX at these low prices, and if you want to lock in a really great entry point in this bear market, because if you're like Richard Hart and a lot of other Hexicans, you're expecting one more leg down before the end of the real bear market. I mean, who knows? We might have seen the end, but this might also just be a relief rally, and we might have a little bit more pain to go, which is what a lot of people are speculating on right now. And if you want to try to capture these lower prices, there might not be much longer to actually be able to. But if you want to capture them, what you're going to want to do for the strategy is go to Uniswap, like usual, right? But then go up to the pool button up here. Right next to swap, click on pool. So what we're doing is, it's not actually a limit order that we're setting. Technically speaking, what we're going to be doing in this strategy is making a new liquidity position. When we make a new liquidity position, all that means is that we're offering up our money so that other people can trade using our money, right? And so that's the whole idea of a decentralized exchange, is that rather than a centralized order book putting up, bids and asks on either side and processing all the orders, all the liquidity is just pooled together by the people, trustlessly. Anybody in the world can do this because it's decentralized and actually trustless, and it's very cool. Now you can see I don't have any active liquidity positions here, but if I wanted to make one, I'd have to pay attention to how I do it. So let's click on new position up here. If you're following along with me and you want to lock in these lower prices, go to new position, and when we're going to add liquidity, we're going to do an example of buying HEX at a very low range, let's say in the 1 to 2 cent range, okay? First of all, we got to pick the coins we care about, right? Which is basically USDC and HEX, okay? So USDC and HEX are what we care about right now. And I'm only saying that because USDC is the most liquid coin to trade against with HEX, which is on purpose, deliberately. It's by design. So once you've got USDC and HEX selected, you're going to see on the price range over here all the different prices that people currently have liquidity at. So this big mountain is a mountain of liquidity, and it's saying at these various price levels, how many people are willing to buy or sell their HEX at these various price levels. So currently we have a price range that is defaulted to a minimum price of 10.9 HEX per USD and a maximum price of 44.1 USDC, HEX per USDC. Now we want to essentially trim down this window. Okay, we want to trim down this window and make it very, very small. But first, let's just make this easier to read. Right now we're looking at it in HEX per USD terms. Let's go up here, and where it says HEX and USDC, let's just flip-flop this toggle right up here, guys. And you're going to be able to see HEX in US dollar terms. So this is probably more familiar with you in your mental framework. Okay, so now we can see that we've got a price range defaulted to 2.2 cents per HEX and a high of 9 cents per HEX. That means if we put up liquidity using this default range, we'd either be selling HEX or buying HEX anywhere in this price range, but we don't want that necessarily, right? We want to buy the dip, right? That's what crypto's all about. So if you want to buy the dip, what you got to do is just make this price range very, very, very small and make it to the left of the current price. And the current price is represented by this vertical white line right here, okay? And we can make this as small as we want to, right? Or we can make this as large as we want to, but let's say for the sake of the example, we want to be buying in between the 1 penny range and the 2 penny range. So I would just go in and edit these two boxes right here and type in 1 cent and 2 cents as my minimum and maximum. So that's essentially going to mean that any time the price of the coin dips into this range over here, you're deploying your USDC in order to scoop up the orders that are selling their HEX into that range. Okay, but it's only going to be activated once the price enters that zone that you're setting for yourself. And so let's step through the functions on the left-hand side. So right here, this 0.3% fee tier, this is what most people are selecting. You can see 81% of people select this. All that means is that the fees that a user pays on Uniswap are going to be 0.3%. Now, most people use this. Sometimes people use 1%. You could see about 20% of people, 19% of people are using the 1% pair. and almost nobody's using the 0.05% fee pair. That's typically for stablecoins only, but I'd recommend just going with the 0.3%. That's what most people use. And that means that when somebody sells their HEX into your effective limit order, or the range-bound liquidity position that I'm talking about right now on the right-hand side, they're going to actually pay you 0.3% of their transaction in fees. So what's actually happening, which is really cool, is you're earning fees instead of paying the fees for also getting the coin that you want to get at the lower prices that you want to get it at. Okay, pretty awesome. So that's the fees. Okay, that's the fees. And let's go ahead and hide that. And let's say, you'll notice over here that the deposit amounts now only show USDC. And that's because I can only put up USDC in this range because this current range is below the current price. Again, if I move this range to be both below and above the current price, you'll see that I now have a HEX and USDC deposit amount. But the cool innovation with Uniswap v3 is that you can set up asymmetric liquidity. All that means is you don't have to put an even amount of coins on the HEX side and the USDC side. You can put up any number of coins that you want on the HEX side and any number of coins that you want on the USDC side. But when I go below the current price, you'll notice, again, that HEX box down in the lower left-hand corner here goes away. Why does it go away? Well, because the range that I have set is lower than the current price, so I can't possibly put up any HEX at these lower prices because people can only sell into that, right? Just like if I had this range above the current price, people could only sell HEX above the current price, because one limitation of Uniswap liquidity pools is you can't do what's called a stop limit order. You can't basically say that when the price goes up to a certain point, then I want to deploy my USDC. Okay, you can only say when the price goes into or down below into my range, then I want to deploy my USDC. So that's kind of why these boxes appear the way they do. Again, if I have a full range, both above and below the market spot price, I'll have the option to deploy both HEX and USDC. Above, it's going to be only HEX, and below, it's going to be only USDC. And obviously, we're interested in buying the dip, which is why we're going to want to just deposit USDC for this particular liquidity position. So you would just put in however much you want, let's say 1,000 US dollars. Now, guys, I would not recommend putting in small amounts for liquidity providing. I mean, this is kind of for larger amounts. I'd really recommend things like $1,000 and up. That's why this is kind of an advanced tactic. It's kind of for a little bit bigger players and a little bit more serious players. You don't have to be a whale, but you have to be smart and you have to know what you're doing. Now, I just moved this range down a lot, but really this range can be as thin as you want it to be. So if you only want to buy HEX at, let's say, 1 penny, you can make this range almost 1 penny, right? You can make it really, really, really close to 1 penny. So let's say I go from negative 78% down below the current price to negative 76%, right? Effectively, then I'm buying between 1 penny and 1.06 pennies, which means if the price crosses into that very, very small range, I basically scoop up HEX at 1 penny price. But there's a caveat here, guys, and there's a reason that this is a more advanced strategy, is that you have to be paying attention to your liquidity position, because if the price dips below 1 penny and then it gets back above 1 penny before you actually check on your liquidity position, and if you don't remove that liquidity position after it gets hit, you have to remove it manually. If you don't, the price is basically going to go below 1 penny and then back above 1 penny, and you're going to be left with all the same USDC that you started with. You're not going to have any HEX because you basically bought the HEX on the way down, but then because you didn't pull out your position in time, the price went back up past your range again, and you just sold all that HEX back for dollars again. So you need to be paying attention to the price for this, which is why it's a little bit more of an active strategy. I don't personally like to do this, but if you think you're smart and if you think you're going to have some kind of good experience with this, I just wanted to put this out there for you. Now you can see I don't have any USDC in this wallet, but basically when you do have your liquidity position live, I'll go to an example over here. This is an example of what it's going to look like when you have a live liquidity position. So fun fact, liquidity positions are actually tokenized as NFTs. And so this is the NFT form of what an example of a liquidity position looks like for the DAI wrapped Ethereum pair. Okay. So you can see this person put up $579 of liquidity, and so far they've made $27 in fees. Again, you're making fees on this, right? And you can choose to collect those fees without removing your liquidity position, but again, for the limit order strategy, once you see that USDC turned into HEX, you're going to be basically all in HEX once the price dips below that range that you set for yourself. You're going to want to click this remove liquidity button, okay? Now, I should mention that adding liquidity and removing liquidity both incur a gas fee, and the gas fees are not necessarily cheap. Let's check out the HEX Ethereum pair right now. if I wanted to preview what one of these transactions would look like, I could preview this, and if I could say, well, I'm going to add this much HEX and this much ETH into the 0.3% fee tier, and at the current price of ETH per HEX, that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and add that liquidity in that range. But you can see right here, it's $60 in gas fee to basically mint. So minting NFTs costs more gas than a typical transaction. That's why these are typically much higher than a simple send or a stake or a simple swap even. Even though swaps are more expensive than sends, liquidity providing transaction fees are even higher. So if you don't have money to blow on gas like this, the strategy probably isn't for you. But if you do have larger amounts of capital to deploy, this could be a good strategy worth looking into. All right. So keep in mind that that's $50 or $60 to create the liquidity pair. And then it's probably another $60 to remove the liquidity pair after the price of HEX goes down into or below your range. So you're talking about maybe $100 worth of gas fees for this strategy, which is why I recommend this is for bigger players with larger amounts that can take that kind of a hit. Because again, you are making the fees too. So the fees that you make from another user selling their HEX into your liquidity range, the fees that you make from that, the 0.3% fee will be paid in HEX, right? Because if a user is spending HEX, the user has to pay fees in the coin that they buy or sell. So if someone's selling HEX, that person has to pay fees in HEX. So you're going to end up with a bunch of HEX that they sell, plus another 0.3% of fees in HEX from that sale. So those fees that you're getting can offset some of these gas fees to get in and out of the liquidity range, but only if, again, you've got larger amounts and the user that traded into your range has larger amounts, because 0.3% of $100 is only, what, 30 cents? But 0.3% of $10,000 is a lot more, right? $300, for example. So that would obviously offset the gas fee. So kind of an interesting strategy, right? This is a really cool innovation it's called asymmetric liquidity in Uniswap v3. So you don't have to put up an even amount of HEX or the other coin, USDC, for example. You don't have to put up an even amount like you did in Uniswap v2. You don't have to put up $10,000 of USDC and $10,000 worth of HEX to make it even. You can choose. You can pick and choose any amount of HEX and any amount of USDC, depending on where your range is. And if your range is, again, below to capture that limit order, or what's effectively a limit order, all you need to do is put up USDC, wait until the price dips below your range. I like the 1 to 2 cent range personally, so maybe even 2.5 cents just in case we never get a dip that low. And again, you can easily go do that just by fixing the numbers here like this. And anytime the price dips into this range, you then have to pay attention and go back into your liquidity positions, which will appear here. And again, they're going to look like this, and you have to manually press the remove liquidity button. Obviously, you can always increase liquidity, but you need to remove it if you want to lock in those lower buys for HEX. So I hope you learned something today. This is a little bit of an advanced tactic. But again, the more you can understand, the more knowledge you have, the smarter you can be in this market, the more you're going to win when the bull market takes off again. And the more HEX you can accumulate now, I mean, it's going to be astronomical when the gains come in a couple of years. Okay. So try to think about it from that perspective and think about how you want to strategize. For most people, I recommend just using matcha.xyz like I explained in my previous videos. So go scroll down. I even made another video about this a long time ago, but I know people don't like to scroll down in the video list. So here's another video, another tutorial, hopefully a little bit better explained for you guys to really understand what you're doing here when it comes to crypto and when it comes to limit orders. So like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.